Hi, I'm Natalie. You may remember me from such roles as elite martial artist and sticky camera operator. Now I'm getting a whole video. It's about abortion.
Let's just both say what we want at the same time on the count of 3.
Okay.
1, 2...
On 3 or after 3?
How could I say it on 3? I'll be saying 3.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Abortion.
Get an abortion. Oh no, we said different things!
In 2017, I got pregnant. I'd always been really terrible at keeping track of my period, but I started to feel tired all the time, I'd gained some weight, and my boobs hurt. A whole bunch. Eventually I realised I needed to take a test, so I went and picked one up with Eric on my lunch break at work. I took it when I got home and it was positive. I knew I didn't want a child at this time in my life, so I spent a lot of time over the next couple of weeks looking up abortion services, ringing hospitals, and crying in the loos and at my desk. The time it took to realise that I was pregnant, on top of finding time to be on hold for half an hour during work hours, to receptionists who told me that I'd need to ring another number and another, to be told that I had to be registered with a GP before I could make an appointment, meant that by the time that I was being seen, I was about 11 weeks pregnant, and so they offered me a surgical abortion under anaesthetic. I had an assessment a few days before the procedure. This was actually during that period of time when the NHS was in crisis because a lack of basic cybersecurity and an over-reliance on Windows XP had led to a successful ransomware attack shutting down huge chunks of their systems. When I went in for my appointment, they were writing everything down on big whiteboards and the nurses were very, very stressed. I was given the option of having an IUS fitted during the procedure. The intrauterine system is a small contraceptive device which is fitted into the uterus and releases progesterone locally to prevent pregnancy. I was under anaesthetic for that bit, so I skipped the one downside of the IUS. I just get to rave about how great they are. No nasty hormone swings because much less hormone is used since it's released just where it's needed. And it's reduced my periods to next to nothing. Big recommend. They didn't tell me that lactation is common after abortion. I debated about whether or not to include this because it's something that I found upsetting. But that's why I decided that I should, because no one told me. Because no one talks about abortion. I felt tense waiting for the operation, but not too afraid. Everyone who dealt with me was super professional and I felt well taken care of. When I woke up afterwards, my biggest feeling was simply of relief and gratitude. In the weeks and months and years afterwards, I've sometimes felt shame over allowing myself to get pregnant, over not arranging the abortion sooner. I've felt melancholy, imagining a different life. But like 95% of people who terminate a pregnancy, I have never regretted it. I know that I'd like children at some point, and I know that I didn't want a child then, and I wasn't ready for one. So, now you know I've had an abortion, but did you know that I work on almost all of the videos on this channel? You can support that work over here on Patreon! If you give us $2 or more than $2, you can get early access to videos and loads of bonus content that we make just for Patreon.
Help us pay our rent!
This was my experience in a place where abortion is free, safe, legal, and local. The experience that every person who is capable of getting pregnant should have available to them.
Hi, sweetie. Hi. Do you know what the #1 cause of death in the United States is? It's abortion.
No, actually,
It's abortion.
Shay, you have a right to one.
Abortion is murder.
I'll abort you after.
You'll abort me after term?
Yes, like late-term abortion. You.
Northern Ireland only decriminalised abortion in 2019, and the Republic of Ireland did so in 2018. The fight for both is now local, as pregnant people are still forced to travel elsewhere to actually find abortion services. Without all of these things, people are forced to wait or raise money, pushing people to illegally purchase and self-administer abortion medication beyond the recommended 9-week safe period. Still, in the very same hospital that I went to, thanks to the hostile environment policies introduced under Theresa May to punish immigration, abortion services, like other non-urgent NHS services, are no longer free for everyone. And despite maternity care being classed as urgent, last year Bart's NHS Trust denied 739 women the free maternity care that their peers take for granted. That's 1 in 20 people being denied or put at risk of poverty. The hostile environment turns doctors, nurses, teachers into border police. So even where people won't be denied medical treatment, it comes with the threat of detention and deportation. That threat, coming from the NHS, ruins lives and kills people. The experience brought me closer to Eric, but generally I felt very isolated by it. I had no idea what anyone would think of me if they knew. Friends, family, colleagues. Aside from one family member who I knew had had an abortion, the majority of opinions that I'd ever heard expressed could be summarised like this. Of course I'm pro-choice, but I'd never have an abortion. In fact, if you'd asked me a number of years ago, with zero stakes, I probably would have casually said the same thing. And yet 1 in 3 people who are capable of getting pregnant will have an abortion at some point, and 23% of all pregnancies in Great Britain are terminated. So where does this huge disconnect come from between what we say and what we do? Growing up in the 2000s, the stories that I saw featuring abortion had this liberal, comfortable, now that things are good approach to abortion. The abortion horror stories were a thing of the distant past and reserved for historical fiction. Now abortion is a legitimate and sometimes even expected choice. So the representations of abortion that found me went like this. Our protagonist unexpectedly discovers that she is pregnant. Due to the circumstances of the pregnancy, our character is a teenager, or the pregnancy was resulting from a one-night stand, our protagonist is expected to get an abortion. I mean, what if this guy got you pregnant? Abort for sure, right? Yeetus that fetus. Sorry, Seth Rogen, you have a fine and lovely face. Sorry they did this to you. But then our pregnant protagonist seizes her agency and determines to keep the baby against all odds and sets off on a wacky, bittersweet journey through pregnancy. Let me take you to a corollary example in another time and place. In Moscow in 1927, 7 years after abortion was legalized in the USSR, Bed and Sofa was made. Lyudmila and Kolya live together in a small apartment in Moscow. While Kolya goes out to work in the bustling city, Lyudmila spends her time sighing with boredom in the house doing chores. When Kolya invites his friend Volodya to stay with them on their sofa, a love triangle forms as Lyudmila enters a relationship with both friends. Get it, girl. But even with 2 lovers, she is starved of affection and excitement. She discovers that she is pregnant, and both the men say that she should have an abortion, as they do not know who the father is and neither want to raise the other's baby. She arrives at the abortion clinic, but after seeing children playing outside the window, she decides to keep the baby and leave Kolya and Volodya. We see her looking hopeful and excited as she leaves Moscow on a train. One of the few scenes that we see her outside of the home. Da, Tsarina! It's easy to see why someone might prefer to make this story to one where our protagonist chooses to terminate against a background where abortion is available. And abortion is the end of that story. 9 months of struggle and character development versus a relatively quick decision and procedure to keep things the same. This pattern is a reflection of the normalization of abortion, but in a context where there are so few pieces of media that show an adult choosing to terminate a healthy pregnancy with no terrible repercussions, it leaves us feeling that this decision is a test of character, that good, strong, caring people will choose to keep the baby. And of course, with a lack of alternative representations of a necessary part of life that 1/3 of people capable of getting pregnant will go through, we are left to internalize the idea that people who have abortions are the opposite. Bad, weak, careless. Juno writer Diablo Cody describes herself as
pro-choice as a person can possibly be,
and has said that with people interpreting the film to have an anti-abortion message,
I don't even know if I would have written a movie like Juno if I had known that the world was going to spiral into this hellish, alternate reality that we now seem to be stuck in.
Referring to Georgia's fetal heartbeat bill, which restricts abortion to within 6 weeks of pregnancy before many people even know that they are pregnant. She says that she now feels that she had a responsibility to be more explicitly pro-choice, and she wasn't, recounting receiving a letter from officials at her Catholic high school.
They were thanking me for writing a pro-life movie, and I was like, I fucking hate all of you.
Dear White People plays with and subverts this pattern. Coco discovers that she is pregnant and agonizes with Kelsey over what to do next.
As much as I'm not the girl who just ups and has a baby, I'm also not the girl who just...
Kelsey accompanies her to the clinic where she stays for a moment before...
Fuck this. I want to leave.
Okay.
She tells the father about the pregnancy before packing her bags and leaving Winchester University. 18 years later, we see Coco rejoicing with her daughter who's just been accepted at Winchester. Surrounded by futuristic fashion and a higher than usual drone volume, Coco takes her daughters to start her time at Winchester.
The sky is too limiting for what you're about to do, my sweet, sweet girl.
Coco Connors.
Coco Connors here.
And we come back to reality, in the clinic. Coco's dreams for her daughter are the dreams she has for herself, and she will not give them up. Her mind is made up. There is no kind of girl who has an abortion. No one expects to have to terminate a pregnancy. It is a necessary part of life that, once again, 1 in 3 people with a womb will go through. But the majority of people who seek an abortion never get represented at all, and that's mothers. Around 2/3 of people who seek to terminate a pregnancy already have at least one child, but we almost never see abortion stories featuring mothers. One brilliant contradictory example is Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
There are options, you know. We just won't mention it to Father Braw and he won't tell God.
Paula is having to choose between going to law school and having another child. Brendan is trying to prove to her that if she doesn't want an abortion, then she can still have both. But she is resigned to giving up her career ambitions until she realizes how much she wants this and decides to go ahead with the abortion. We see how much the image of abortion as something for other, younger people, certainly not a mother of 2, holds Paula back.
I'm a married mother of 2. Okay, those options are for teenagers the month after winter formal.
You know who I think you should talk to? Rebecca. She's young. I bet she's had tons of options.
And even at the end of the episode, surrounded by her caring family who supports her decision, shame stops her from telling her friend about what she has been through. In reference to the pro-choice movement's decision to avoid talking about mothers' motives for having abortions, Gloria Feldt, president of Planned Parenthood Federation of America, has said,
I believe the whole movement has made a terrible mistake in focusing on the less frequent reasons, which are rape and incest, or teens who are simply not ready to be parents.
We choose these examples to defend because they represent the utmost cruelty of anti-abortion legislation, where people have had to fight for exceptions for victims of rape, incest, and people who will be seriously harmed by pregnancy. Saga is one of the stories that initially inspired me to make this video. It's a superbly fun fantasy space opera about a young family trying to survive war and find friendship, narrated by an edgy baby. It's a really great read and the artwork is gorgeous, and I kinda hated the way it represented abortion. In Volume 8, Alana suffers a miscarriage, but because she and Marco's peoples are at war, they cannot return to their home planets for a procedure to remove the baby, without which Alana will die. Instead, they go to an outpost planet under Landfall's control and travel to Abortion Town. With Alana being 8 months along in her pregnancy, the Abortion Town mayor reluctantly refuses because Landfall's laws forbid 3rd trimester abortions, apparently regardless of the health of the pregnancy. The mayor of Abortion Town tells them to travel to the Badlands where there are doctors who will do anything, no questions asked. They travel to the Badlands and discover on the way that the lost baby is giving Alana magic powers, including the ability to simulate visions of potential futures. The child that they would have had, the brother that their daughter Hazel would have had. When they get to the Badlands, with Alana's life immediately at stake, they meet the Endwife, who looks like this. In desperation, they accept the help of the scary blood-soaked monster with a table full of bloodied hacksaws and medical iPod. Alana shares a room with an unconscious patient who the end wife explains has just been through the abortion of a viable fetus at 30 weeks. This spurs a discussion where Marco explains that while he is grateful for the help his wife is receiving, he is uncomfortable with what the end wife does, stating that as a pacifist he chooses to believe that the taking of any life should always be avoided, to which the end wife replies, ideologies are lovely, but down here is only reality. Whose reality? I can't imagine every woman who comes to you only does so because her own life is in danger. No, like most, my last patient could have easily carried her child to term. The word easily is doing a lot of work in this sentence. But only days ago, doctor was able to detect that her unborn had developed most terrible brain defect. Her little one may have survived, but there is no question the child's life would have been short and painful. So this conversation is reflective of the extreme reality that many people have been allowed to die, or have been forced to give birth to children who will die, because they've been refused even medically necessary abortions. This was the case for Savita Halapanova, who was killed in 2012 when University Hospital Galway refused her request for an abortion after a partial miscarriage. However, it means that what Saga offers in direct response to the question of is abortion morally acceptable is yes, when it's necessary to save the lives of people with dangerous pregnancies or prevent the suffering of unborn children. It deflects Marco's question with perfect victims. As a story about miscarriage, I think it's done a wonderful job, cathartically teasing out the feelings of guilt and shame that can accompany the loss of a baby. It feels awful and surreal that she is criminalised for losing a baby, but in reality there are many examples of grieving parents being criminally investigated after a miscarriage. And I think that the device of the magical simulation of the child that they could have had, created through Alana's longing and grief, is a really wonderful way to corporealise the loss that might be hard for others to see, and find closure for the characters. But they decided to use it to host a superficially controversial abortion debate with very little substance. And by superficially controversial with very little substance, I mean edgy. It's aesthetically as provocative as possible, but philosophically, practically, morally, it's not provocative at all. Despite all the fuck the patriarchy jabs, the mayor of Abortion Town calling out the elected men regulating women's bodies, the band of pro-life bandits who get their comeuppance, and the fantastic trans representation, the overall impression that this story leaves you with is, of course,
that was her choice.
But I would never have an abortion. There's this huge cast of characters and situations being shown, and yet Saga chooses to defend abortion only through the most extreme cases of perfect victims. Our protagonist is not even having an abortion. She has had a miscarriage. The only character we see who is seeking a termination for a presumably healthy pregnancy is shot dead by previously mentioned pro-lifers. Hey, did you guys know that Dirty Dancing is great? Like, there's this fantastic look at class and gender, and the whole thing is set in this incredibly claustrophobic environment, a family holiday resort in 1963, with eyes and judgment around every corner. The sparking conflict of the film is Penny, the dance instructor's unwanted pregnancy. Her friends, the regular staff at the holiday resort, try to help her pay for an abortion but cannot afford it. And the person who got her pregnant, and certainly can afford it, is a giant asshole.
Some people count, some people don't. Read it. I think it's a book you'll enjoy, but make sure you return it. I have notes in the margin.
Hey, quick note, Eric here. I just wanted to say, 2 years ago I bought 3 copies of Atlas Shrugged for a gag in a video, and these guys really do write notes in the margin.
Baby, without explaining more than that a friend is in need, asks her father for money to pay for the abortion, and learns to dance so that she can replace Penny for an essential performance and secure her summer's pay while Penny goes through with the procedure. The performance goes fine, but when they return, Penny's friends are gathered around her room concerned. She is suffering after her procedure, which was performed unsafely, and so Baby fetches her father, a doctor, to help her. It's such a powerful image, seeing all these working class kids fighting for Penny to get the abortion that she needs, and gathered around to take care of her when, forced by economic inequality to rely on a shoddy practitioner, it causes her pain. We see her later, happy and well, and relieved to learn that she can still have children. The film makes it abundantly clear that this situation is wrong, is the consequence of inequality and prohibitive laws, and that Penny deserves better. No perfect victim necessary. Good job. I love it. Now for a bad one.
This is a story about a woman, Susan, who lives an incredibly privileged life, yet she's not happy, she's not fulfilled.
Nocturnal Animals is a story within a story. Susan is an incredibly privileged woman, married with an adult daughter and a successful art career, but is very unhappy. She receives a book written by her ex-husband, Edward, who she divorced 20 years ago. The book is a thriller in which a mother, father, and teenage daughter are harassed by a dangerous group of strangers on an empty West Texas road who kidnap them and ultimately rape and murder the wife and daughter. The husband sets out to bring the men to justice and eventually seek revenge. We see the thriller unfold while Susan reads the novel alongside her daily life, which she finds increasingly dull, shallow, pretentious, and unsatisfying as she reflects on her relationship with and divorce from Edward. At the end, they arrange to meet. She gets dressed up fancy, looking forward to reconnecting with him, and she gets stood up. Ha, owned! What a bitch! With Jake Gyllenhaal playing both the father in the novel and Amy Adams' ex-husband, we read the family as Edward's sad, longing imagining of a life that they could have had together, stripped away by villains. And when Susan is stood up at the end of the movie, we realise, as she does, that she was not the loving, victimised wife in his story, but the villain. And this is Edward's revenge.
This manuscript ends up coming to her at just the right time when she's starting to realize that she's made some serious mistakes in her life.
Susan's decision to terminate her pregnancy and leave him for her current husband is, in Edward's book, represented by the rape and murder of his wife and child. Now, I don't mean to say that this is an anti-choice movie, but the abortion is characterized as betrayal and is used to represent a life of regret. Also, the movie generally kind of hates women.
I agree with Linda. We hired her, we should support her. New doctor?
No. New haircut. But Susan, you were the one who brought it up last meeting that you were looking for change.
I know, but now I think we should keep her. Sometimes maybe it's not such a good idea to change things quite so much.
All of the people in this film being used to represent privileged, sterile bouginess and shallow morality are women, queer-coded men, and a singular Chad, devoid of any personality besides cucking Edward and being a rich Chad. It kind of really hates women, actually.
Sometimes maybe it's not such a good idea to change things quite so much.
This is my name for it. If someone else has already named it, I don't care. This is better. In a census of American film and TV, it was found that 15% of abortion plots resulted in the character's death, either through complications, murder, or suicide. Between 2005 and 2016, 37% of characters who obtained an abortion suffered major medical or psychological consequences, versus just 2.1% of patients who suffer mostly minor health complications in reality. This is especially related to the abundance of storylines involving abortion set in times where abortion is not yet legal. These are the bury your gays of abortion storylines. In order to garner sympathy for a character doing such a condemned act as terminating a pregnancy, they must be the most perfect victims or suffer the most brutal consequences, to the point where it feels like writers are exacting karmic narrative revenge on characters seeking abortions, even if they aim to defend their right to do so. While it's incredibly important to talk about and remember the impact of unsafe abortions that will always result from any restricted access to abortion services, anti-choice activists capitalize on this association, which is then made between abortion and pain and death.
To make sure that they don't die on the abortion table, to make sure that they aren't butchered by abortionists.
To just go in there with somebody that has a medical degree, but the facility that doesn't help them if they start bleeding out.
People vastly overestimate the danger of having an abortion, which is no more dangerous a procedure than a tooth extraction. In the US, this has been used as a wedge to push through legislation that restricts access to abortion through the guise of regulating its safety. Right now, the Supreme Court in the US is hearing a challenge to the 2014 Unsafe Abortion Act in Louisiana, which could shut down all 3 abortion clinics in the state. This image of abortion as unsafe is also capitalized upon by legislators through informed consent laws, which force doctors to flat out lie to their patients that abortion increases the risk of cancer, suicide, and infertility.
So before the procedure, you'll need to look at an ultrasound and listen to the heartbeat, or heartbeats if you're having a litter.
Why does she have to listen to the heartbeat?
It's the law. Also, by law, I have to tell you that at 1 month your puppies have a favorite color, and that color may be blue.
It's also unfortunately the case that a lot of cis men can engage with this topic so freely because it's not a site of pain for us. As the Alabama Senate recently showed, sometimes hearing real graphic testimony just doesn't work. And so in order to bring this topic home to those people, I decided to present this admittedly very macabre fantasy.
So, showing perfect victims going through unspeakable horrors is not enough. Okay, but what if aliens, though? Abortion horror typically operates as an exaggeration of the perfect victim trope, often showing the horror of forced pregnancy viscerally with a literal alien invasion of the body. Prometheus approaches this with pretty cruel dramatic irony, as Shaw, who we have seen speaking on her faith as a Catholic and trying to conceive, is impregnated by her husband while he is infected by alien goo, and she is forced to remove the alien spawn from her body herself. In the context of the Alien franchise, in which the alien itself is designed to evoke psychosexual fears and impose that fear on men via chest bursters, this forced pregnancy can be seen as an allegory for pregnancy resulting from sexual assault. These plots can often feel exploitative of people's fears around pregnancy, and the frequency with which female characters undergo briefly traumatic, mystical horror pregnancies only to never think of them again in sci-fi and fantasy series is definitely a weird kind of problem. An example of abortion horror that I think is pretty great is The Fly. Put simply, it's a movie about feeling trapped when someone that you love turns into something awful and frightening. Near the dramatic climax of the film, Geena Davis realizes that she is pregnant, and we see her have a nightmare that she will give birth to a thing like her partner has become. The change that Jeff Goldblum undergoes could be seen as anything from illness to becoming an abusive partner, and Geena's consequent decision to have the pregnancy terminated rings really true to life. Though we don't know that the baby will become like the father is now, the literal bug baby monster child is not the threat. Being tied into a relationship that is hurting her by a pregnancy that she doesn't want is the threat. A+, 10 out of 10. This is a movie that, in my opinion, actually validates abortion out of the "your pregnancy is going to kill you" context. I binged Witcher over Christmas, and I would describe it as delicious trash. A friend called it BBC Game of Thrones, and yeah, that's exactly it. Witcher features a couple of mentions of abortion. First in Jaskia's song,
"Need old man the hag to stir up a potion so that your lady might get an abortion." Abort yourself!
And second in the Striga episode. The Striga is a monster that survived in a cursed form after escaping the body of its mother, who died during pregnancy. It is described in the show as a walking abortion. It is outrageous and ridiculous, and obviously not actually a representation of abortion in any way, but the casual reference for comedy and horror in a medieval setting, without trying to start a debate or even defend anyone's choice, made me feel good, because abortion is a fact of life. I found it kind of freeing. In BoJack Horseman, Diane accidentally tweets from Sextina Aquafina's account that she is having an abortion, leading Sextina to write this song where she flies around on coat hangers and shoots giant fetuses in space with lasers.
America, get your uteruses turned, cause this song is called Get That Fetus, Kill That Fetus.
Oh dear.
I'm a baby killer. Baby killing makes me horny. Aliens inside me, we're gonna squash it like Sigourney.
No,
Get that
stop.
fetus, kill that fetus, get that fetus, kill that fetus. Brat, brat, pew, pew, brat. Your
Diane is naturally horrified at the idea that this song is doing harm to the cause and giving forced birthers ammunition. But then...
Getting an abortion is scary, with all the protesters out front and how you have to listen to the heartbeat and all that. And when you can joke about it, it makes it less scary, you know?
Yeah.
We should seek to live in a world where abortion is normalized enough that instead of stories of misery and pain made out of desperation, we can get some silly trash that makes us feel visible and normal and strong. Okay, quickfire. Here are some of the great stories made in recent years that thoughtfully show ordinary people having abortions for ordinary reasons with no repercussions. Glow. Sam comes to the clinic with her to take care of her. It's sweet and simple and normal. Sex education. Really well handled in a way that really shows how you can just not know how to feel. Massive props for representing a mother also coming in for an abortion, which represents the majority of cases. Obvious Child. This is a rom-com where a first date leads to our protagonist getting pregnant and needing an abortion, but also she still really likes the guy. Very funny, extremely sweet. Check it out. A few months after my abortion, I came across a podcast called The Abortion Diary, where each episode is a new person talking about their experiences with abortion from all walks of life. I cannot tell you how cathartic this was, and if you are struggling with this experience or you want to learn about others' experiences, I really recommend it. Stories matter, and abortion does not have to be something we never talk about. Ollie's abortion video makes the final argument in the abortion debate. Any amount of personhood contained within a fetus does not contradict a pregnant person's right to bodily autonomy. And I really recommend this video from Shanalika to expand on that idea. The British public agrees, by the way. While 44% of people say that life begins at conception, just 7% want to see abortion banned. I wanted to make this video after seeing Ollie's because as a person who's had an abortion, I really wanted to see something where this bodily reality that literally 1/3 of people capable of getting pregnant go through is not up for debate. I wanted to see a story that doesn't rely on fear and horror to apologize for reality. I grew up thinking, of course it's a person's right to choose, but I would never. Because as a young person who'd never been in a relationship before, I literally couldn't imagine getting pregnant. Many people who talk like this or say, well, people should have the right, but if you're capable of taking care of a child, then it's selfish, or even take an anti-abortion stance, are essentially morally lucky. They've never had a pregnancy that they've not wanted or been able to care for yet. But I cannot say this enough. Literally 1/3, 1 in 3, 33%, 1.6 Spice Girls, 2 of these old women have had an abortion. Statistically, 1 of Marge, Salma and Patty Bouvier have had an abortion, and statistically, it's Marge. And in the face of that, the subtle shaming and not so subtle terrorizing of people who don't want to or can't keep a pregnancy is ludicrous and hurts us all. We will always be fighting to protect the most vulnerable victims of a vicious system until that reality is acknowledged for everyone. I want to say very clearly that if you decide to have an abortion and you feel sad or scared before or after, that doesn't mean that you've done something wrong. And if you don't feel particularly sad or ashamed or afraid, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. Those feelings might come and go at unexpected times. That's natural for any big life decision. Whatever happens, be kind to yourself.
I know from the outside it might seem like I should be ready for kids, but I can't.
Diane, you don't need to explain anything to anyone.
action!